Hey everyone, welcome back to the main stage here at Product Summit 2021. I am extremely excited to welcome Louis to the stage. Louis is the CPO of Ajua. Ooh. Sorry, I have two windows open. Louis is the CPO of a startup called Ajua. They're a software company that helps join businesses with their customers and sort of facilitate their interactions through chat, through management, and things like that. And he's here to talk to us today about working with different types of businesses, especially in the context of Africa, and how working with an SME versus working with an enterprise has big cultural ramifications. So I'll pass the stage over to Louis. Welcome.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for the intro. So I just wanted to talk about how you can use culture to be able to scale working with and just trying to determine what area to work with in terms of choosing to work in the enterprise space or whether to go after the SME space. And just to clarify, my background is really based in building startups in Africa. So this is what I know, and this is what I've experienced. And there might be different experiences in different places. But one of the biggest challenges that startups have, startup investors all want you to go after a big market. But when you find yourself in a country which is small, most of the big countries are either the US, China, perhaps India, but you find yourself in a small country which is fragmented, and so you're thinking about how do I build a startup that can actually scale and grow globally, because you're just living in a small country, How do you cross boundaries with the information that you have, starting with the market that you are in? And one of the things that, first of all, you have large enterprises. So large enterprises are typically very, very difficult to work with. I don't think anybody will advise a startup to start and say, okay, I want to build for large enterprises. But there's an opportunity there, especially if you have that background, how these businesses operate, and you can have the time, especially because nothing moves fast with large enterprises. The risk here is that one, working with large enterprises, the chance of failure are massive. You likely not even get started because of just trying to get signatures done left, right, and center. I know there are other ways to go around that, but it's just extremely difficult to work as a startup to work with a large enterprise. Now, but if you're able to overcome all that, you're able to overcome all that. There are certain advantages that working with large enterprises, especially if you're based in a smaller country or a smaller market. The thing is with large enterprises, company cultures or how businesses or how large enterprises work are almost the same globally. So a company, a large enterprise, a large bank in Nigeria, pretty much works the same way as a large bank in the US. Works the same way as a large bank in terms of their systems, their processes. There might be things that are different. They may speak a different language, local nuances, but systems and processes are just the same. The people who run these companies went to the same business schools. They go for the same trainings. They go for the same thing. So there's a similarity. So you could be able to, if you're able to come in living in a small country, in a small market, but working with a large company, that you can build something that actually is transferable across borders. So if it works for a bank, for example, in Nigeria, there's a good chance it's going to work or it's going to be applicable. The challenges with working with big companies are pretty much around compliance. Do you comply with this process? Do you comply with this? Do you have this? Can you integrate with this particular, ERP or core banking system, for instance? So once you're able to crack working with large enterprises in a small market, there's a good chance that you can scale this out to across borders, across continents, because corporations pretty much, in terms of how they work, how they have processes, are pretty much the same. So there's an advantage there to coming from a small country, in the sense that you might be able to get into that system and scale across borders. But it's extremely difficult because that again, corporations are this corporate culture. There's a way things are done. So if you're not from that background, it's just going to be very, very hard to understand or even to be able to succeed. Then the second part is now the SME space, which leaves this SME space, this small and medium-sized enterprise. Now, coming from Africa, again, that is a little nuanced in the sense that we generally have large corporations and then small size companies. So you're really talking about small and micro businesses that you're going after, and there are many, So if for example you look at maybe a country like Kenya, where I'm from, or Nigeria, you'll see that there'll be many enterprises. But I mean, to be able to really scale, you'll still need very, very many of those businesses to be on board on your product for you to be successful. Now, the challenge here is that the small and micro business space, again, is very, very culture specific. Business cultures tend to be very, very, very localized. So a small business or a micro business in Kenya is not is just so different from a micro business across the border in Uganda, which is very different from a micro business in Nigeria, for instance. And there are very many nuances that make that happen, whether it's how contractual relationships, personalized, or so it becomes very, very. You might have a product that works in one market and it works very well because you attached yourself to that culture, and then it becomes very difficult for it to scale across the border because the business culture is so different. And so my argument here is that, yes, that happens, but there's ways in which you can circumvent that, because it's looking at business subcultures. So you find that as much as ways of doing businesses are very, very localized across different countries, there are certain things that are global. And I'll give you an example of software development. There's software development is software development anywhere in the world. And so software developers just work a certain way regardless of where they are, whether they're in Kenya, whether they're in the US, whether they're in Russia, whether they're in Belgium, for instance. They work the same way. So that's a subculture that as a business, as a startup, as an entrepreneur, you can latch onto that culture. But it's the same way in, that's more on a professional services. So you find that professional services have their subcultures. There are ways of working that you can latch on that scale across borders, because that's just what these professionals do, because again, they're always developing and working on global standards. But then, in our markets, again, most entrepreneurs, again, are not necessarily, or most are not are providing localized service. So again, it's you'd be able to crack the cultural barriers if you focus on a professional services space where there's a global standardization or an emerging global standardization that allows you to that makes it make sense across borders. Whether it's you think about accounting, accountants work a certain way. Whether it's dentists work a certain way. Doctors work a certain way, and those doctors are all over and across the borders. And so one way of scaling and using culture to really grow is finding professional subcultures that you can latch onto to grow across borders. Even in the less formal areas, you'll find that there are certain things that cut across the globe. And so you can then use that as a pivot. So one of the key things, and I'll give you an example. One of the, in terms of product development, you find that there's a lot of lending that happens at the SME level, where a merchant probably sells goods on credit in an informal way. And that's something that's very, very, like, almost all countries almost have a systematic way of doing that, but that's something that they do. And then there's a culture around that, and how can you can tap into that and just make few modifications across borders to be able to make that, to be able to scale a product, for example, that solve that problem to scale across the globe. But just circling back to the whole idea that SMEs and micro SMEs are very, very cultural businesses. Small business in Kenya, a kiosk in Kenya, or a shop, if I call it a grocery store in Kenya, a local corner grocery store in Kenya, is very, very different from a grocery store across the border, and how they relate with their customers, how they work. They're very, very different. So it's very, very hard to be able to just transfer that knowledge across the border and make it work. Now, there are things that then might happen that open up a way for which to cross those borders. One of these phenomena that I see a lot in our markets is things like mobile money, that creating a new, that are somewhat disruptive in the sense of this is how people used to do, and it was very localized. And some new technology comes in, and everybody wants to figure out how this works. And one way of doing that is latching onto these new technologies, whether it's mobile money, whether it's logistics. There's in our markets in Africa, there's a lot of new logistics using motorcycles that are coming up, and everybody's still trying to figure out, oh, how does this work? So that gives you an opening into a culture in a way that trying to understand how traditional businesses are working just doesn't scale across borders. Yeah. So I'll take a pause there and answer any questions at this point.
I have a question for you, Louis.
Yeah.
Is how do you manage, because obviously you've worked with many different types of customers and different types of regions at Ajua. What's your playbook for managing all that information?
Yeah.
How do you synthesize and bring it into your organization so there's not a lot of overlap or miscommunication on how that culture gets assimilated?
I think we are still keep on learning, because like I say, if I share my background, is that we've worked with larger companies across borders, and very it was straightforward. There isn't it works once you have it figured out in one place, it pretty much works across borders. Because you're tapping into business practices that are standardized, and opportunities that all these people read the same books. So it's easy in that sense. Then once go up downscale into the small and medium-sized businesses, that's essentially what we're learning. Like, okay, wow, what we know here does not apply here at all. It's a whole different cultural context that we have to learn. And outside of having you just have to have people who are out of that locality or that background, who are really driving this and really driving adoption, understanding the customer, doing the user research into the nuances of. Otherwise, you just spend a lot of time pushing the wrong product, that doesn't get adapted.
Okay, cool. And what's the practical way you capture that insight? Like, do you have sort of a document where people are sort of saying, like, here's some interesting things we discovered about this type of customer, this segment, or do you have like different teams assigned to different regions? And like
I wish we had different teams. We are a very lean team, in terms of organization. So we've documented a lot of these lines, but to be quite honest, we have not. So we've done two countries, which are two SME markets, you know. So we've done one, which the first market is almost, you take it, everybody is working that market and everybody understands. Then the second market is, this is new to us. So, and so it's like, okay, what do we do? What are the things that we need to change? And these are things that we are actively, it's like we're in the middle of, we're in the middle of the fight right now. Like, okay, wow, this is something completely different. It does not and go new frontier, and so it's just a constant iteration, and also it's just, again, making sure that you have people in those markets that guiding you.
Cool, makes sense. That's all the questions for me. So I'll dive off and let you continue.
Any question?
No, I think that's all the questions we have at this stage. Just those two.
Okay. All right.
Cool. Does that bring you to the end of your talk?
Yeah, I was just waiting for any questions. Yeah.
No, I think those are the only two that we got teed up this time around.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, Louis, thank you so much for sharing that experience with us. Do you have any sort of parting thoughts or any single lesson you'd like to share with the group before we wrap it up?
I think you know, business, especially if you're building business applications, business is culture. It's not. Yes, there's a lot of transactions. Or building products is culture. There's the products that are using are really trying to, you know, culture in a way that simplifies or validates what they're doing, and so it's always important as of product development to really understand, you know, of things that are shaping that culture. And again, my experience in Africa, and there's some certain things that are global culturally, but after some point they just hit a wall in terms of adoption. And this nuance, again, culture and income. Work in low income markets, and there's certain things, adoption just hits a wall where they cannot be adopted no matter what. So you'll have a segment that will adopt. So I might take a product like Spotify. Spotify is global. Spotify is available in Africa, but it only hits a certain, it's, you know, where the income can to be able to adopt another culture or another way of doing things, but without so there's some things that will grow across borders, across the globe, but will just hit that limit in terms of adoption just because of culture and its implications, income and its implication on culture. There's certain things I will just never use because it's just never going to be affordable. Even though it's popular, everybody in the world is using it, but it's just not going to happen, you know? And so this is some of the nuances that you end up having to, you know, really think about as we develop products, especially in countries like Africa, in places like Africa, and then how those nuances play out across. And then again, you're trying to scale a product and make impact globally. You're not trying to make a product that just, and there's nothing wrong with making a product that just works for your country or a small, but again, I think we're talking about investors here, and investors are always looking for large outcomes. So you're trying to figure out, I as an entrepreneur in a small market, and I'm trying to go, you know, how is that going to happen?
Yeah.
You know, how is that I can pull? And I think entrepreneurs in small markets, in smaller markets, one of the things is really understanding the cultures that you're trying to sell into.
Yes.
Global cultures. So Spotify example, it's an income. It's a global middle class, but it's all global. This if you're looking at your market, if you're developing a product like Spotify in a small market, you'll say there's no market here. There's just no people who will afford this product.
Yeah.
But then, okay, small market here, but this small market resembles a larger market across the globe. Then you would be able to say, okay, wow, I'll go for it. So
Yeah.
it's just the interplay of culture, income, and how all those relate with each other are very key, especially in developing a product. I hope that makes sense.
That does. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I guess on that note, we'll end the talk here. Louis, thank you so much for taking the time to share this with us. And I'll just say to the audience, we have our last speaker of the day coming up after this short break. So we'll all see you soon. And yeah, thanks again, Louis.